not know, I work on the business and technology team, and I'm leading these consulting one-on-one webinar series that are happening this summer. On Handshake, you can find all upcoming events that are happening related to consulting. We're also doing this for finance and technology as well. So just check Handshake for Finance 101, Tech 101, and Consulting 101, just to keep getting some online connections this summer. The goal of this is to help you see how informational interviews work, so that during the summer you can use that time to facilitate those connections and have those conversations as well. For general, just housekeeping things, please keep yourself on mute while we're on the call. You're welcome to have your video on if you'd like to, totally up to you. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. That's a great place to put them. If you want to change your view in the top right to speaker view, so you can just see who's talking versus all little blocks, you're welcome to do that just by changing it to speaker view up there. Last thing is just in terms of staying in touch with our community, we have launched a Slack channel recently too. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the information in the follow-up email, and we'll probably put it in the chat as well. Meg or Kyle or Catherine will take care of that to sign up for it, but wanted to get you all plugged into that as well, just to keep yourselves updated. But you're all not here for me, you're here for Catherine, our alum. So let's go ahead and get started. Catherine, welcome. Thank you for being here. And to get us started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career trajectory at your major at UVA? Give us the dirt.
Sure. Afternoon or good evening, everybody. I'm Catherine Kane. I'm excited to be with you guys. Go Who's. Always a good day to be a Who. I had a really weird way to get into the professional world, so I'll kick it off with what I did at UVA. I'm a history major through and through, graduated with Malcolm Brogdon, so that's my bright and shining moment. Would do history a billion times over. I loved it. I loved all the professors at UVA. Would definitely be another history major if I could. And with that, I kind of had no idea what I could do with a history major. Everybody told us that we were going to be professors or work in HR. So my first official big-time job out of school was in HR as an admin. So I supported the recruiting process and talent acquisition. But my first actual job out of school, I was a baker. I live in Richmond. There's this family-owned bakery in the Fan area. And I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning and go knead dough for 6 hours, and then after my shift I'd go to retail and work for another few hours. So whatever you plan to do after school, it's going to be the right decision for you, and it helped me get a better understanding of really the grind of work and literally rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty. And it definitely gave me a new appreciation for the professional world. So if you're worried, especially in coronavirus and what's going on now, any choice, anything that gets you involved with a routine after school is going to be the best way to get into it. Drew, I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that was kind of my story leading up to consulting.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, I think, to hear about the first experience. Tell us a little bit about how you transitioned over then to CapTech and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, so in the recruiting space, which was really great for me at the time, it opened a lot of doors. You end up talking with a lot of C-suite and executive level folks, and I started learning a lot about their real problems. So for recruiting, a lot of it feels reactive, but you are getting insight and building really good relationships with these executives. Even though they see you as an equal, you're not that impactful. So friend of a friend, CapTech, the company I work for now, they said, hey, we're looking for somebody with Workday experience. And I had been elbows deep in Workday in the recruiting space for a while, and I had really heard the real problems that the company was having where I'd worked, and I formerly worked at the CarMax home office. And I kept on shaking my head, why you're not really solving your problems, you're just helping these symptoms. And I wanted to be more impactful. So when I interviewed with CapTech, that was kind of my lead. I had zero technical experience, really. I knew how to connect with executives. I knew how to talk to them, how to get on their level, but I didn't really know how to diagnose the problem from a technical sense, but I could sort of act as a scrum master and make their words make sense to the people on the system side. So I think it was really helpful as well to be a history major, because all the time we're having to summarize thousands upon thousands of pages of text and make it impactful for anybody, ages 7 to 70. And that's what consulting is for me right now, is making data, information, and technology palatable to those C-suite people who really don't care and don't have time to care about this, the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, that's super helpful and super cool, I think, Catherine, to hear about like a non-technical background entering a technical consulting role, and kind of what the skills that you gained from liberal arts sort of help to serve you with that. So this group is, I think, super curious about what technical consulting is and sort of how it's defined. Consulting is, broken down into so many different sub-industries. Just give us a basis of understanding. Could you help us understand collectively, what is technical consulting overall? How would you define it?
I love that question. I actually hadn't thought about it until you sent it over to me. But I define technical consulting as using experience, your research, listening, and asking client questions in order to best advise and support your clients to make the appropriate technical decisions. So to break that down, again, I'm not a developer by any means. I'm not somebody who's tech savvy in that sense, but I do have experience, and I have heard people explain their problems and maybe not even know what the real root cause of the problem is, but they know the end result is not what they want. So I see technical consulting as using your experience and using your boots on the ground knowledge, and then researching, maybe that's market research, maybe it's past client research and stories, using all of that collective experience to support the client in making a technical decision. Often, and I'm at a particular company with CapTech, because we have turned down jobs where when we bring in technical expertise, we explain to the client what we think would be best based on what we're hearing from them and stakeholder interviews, et cetera. And the client wants to go a direction and they're hell-bent on going that way. But CapTech feels deeply that that's probably not the best decision in the long term. So we've, sometimes you have to say no and say, okay, that's your decision. And I think if that's the way you want to go, that's great. But part of technical consulting is providing that tough love and really being a consultant. There's a lot of opportunity out there, if you are new, to do a sort of staff aug role where the client tells you what to do and you do it. But the true meaning of consulting is providing some tough feedback and to be aggressive. If you know and you've done your research and you have experience, you have all of the power to say what you feel. And I think that was something that I learned really quickly in the consulting world after coming from the internal side of things with CarMax, is that all of a sudden I went from a 24-year-old who had zero power in a company to being a 24 and a 2-month-old to having all of the influence at a major Fortune 500 company, just because I had a consultant in my title. So I think while you don't want to run around and make decisions that aren't based in fact, eventually as you build your experience repository, if you will, you'll gain your confidence, and you can help your clients make those decisions on their own, and you can do it without fear of second guessing yourself. I kind of droned on, but again, I think it's a great, like being a non-con student or a non-econ major or physics major or what have you. I think that at least in my journey, that's been paramount, because a lot of my coworkers, they're super smart and they're technical, but they are quiet during the stakeholder interviews because they don't feel confident in their ability to share what their expertise really means to them. So that's kind of where I get to step in.
That's awesome. Well, I think you referenced a ton about your daily work and sort of the research element of things, presentation. I guess just tell people, I think people are super curious about what does a life look like as a consultant, like on a daily or a weekly basis? I know that it changes a lot. It's never super stable, but just give us some insight on what your days typically look like, how they're sort of structured and what they look like just for the students on the call.
Yeah, so Drew, you're spot on. It really varies. I mean, it varies across company, across role, and across vertical. For me, since I've been at CapTech a year and a half now, it's been starting off, it's been a lot of shadowing. So I'll be on a client with maybe 4 other CapTechers. So it's pretty small, very intimate. I schedule a bunch of calls with stakeholders on the client side. So in COVID times, it's a lot of video chat. It's a lot of connecting with their human side. So in the past few months, it's been a lot of, I'm meeting some of their kids, I'm meeting some of their dogs, and really making sure that I'm here for them, maybe not after 5 p.m., but that I'm here for them if there's a problem that's coming up. It's establishing a relationship. So that's probably 20% of my day, 25% of my day is really maintaining a relationship with the client that I have. I usually am not on more than 1 or 2 clients at any given time, so you really get to be present with them. The other, I'd say like 30% of my time is spent prioritizing. It's planning out what my week will look like, and I usually work in agile sprints. I try to chunk out my time in 2 weeks, so I'll know, okay, if I'm going to schedule a demo, a demonstration, a workday a week and a half from now, what do I need to get in place before that happens? And then a lot of the time, especially recently, has been training. I think a huge thing that companies are now starting to invest in is soft skill and hard skill training. I've been actually right now, I get to talk to you guys, but my company is hosting training for people who want to get into proposals, to learn how to write proposals for clients and win work. So a good portion recently of my time, 15% is for training. And I know a lot of companies, you don't often have like time spent during the day that you can allocate to training, but I think it's super important. So if you can do it, even now, if you have LinkedIn Learning, I would suggest jumping in there and looking up some courses that can at least help you with your soft skills. That's been really helpful for me. And finally, I'd say that the other whole portion of my day is keeping in lockstep with my CapTech team. We really push having our consultants work on teams, even if a standard statement of work says calls for only 1 person, 1 consultant. CapTech always wants to have CapTechers rallying around you. So what I spend a lot of my time is we use Microsoft Teams. So I'm teaming my teammates. We're updating decks in Microsoft Teams. We're connecting with each other, sending each other memes. Any way that we can keep each other connected, make sure that we're all staying mentally stable and that we're there for each other. So just as much as I'm there for the client, I'm there for my coworkers, because we don't want anybody feeling like they're on an island. And particularly for us young people, you want to make sure they're supported and don't ever have to solve a problem by themselves.
Oh, I love that. That was great. Well, and Catherine, you referenced LinkedIn Learning, which is a great tool to mention for students that they have access to. Students, you also have access to Coursera as well. That expires July 30th, where we have access to an extensive list of courses. I'm probably have one of my colleagues, Kyle, Meg, or Catherine, drop the link to that in the chat for you all. But great ways of gaining the hard skills and soft skills that you might need for different roles. Catherine, you talked a lot about sort of the types of skills that have been helpful for you in this technical role. And how would you reference, how important would technical experience be in a technical consulting role? It sounds like you could be successful without it, but how important would you rate it to be in that type of role?
I'd say, Drew, that the most important thing is the ability to learn quickly and absorb as quickly as possible. As you gain technical expertise, it's definitely going to help not only you get placed on projects, but help you be more impactful and really have a seat at the table. So it sort of depends. I think right off the bat, when you join a consulting firm, some value technical expertise at a different level. Even if you're brand new, I'd say it's like 25%. Like you need to have some, at least awareness of the system and how it works, even if it's just end user stuff. So say if somebody's like, do you know how to use Salesforce? You may not know how to build it, but you have seen it before, maybe even just Googled Salesforce and look at some screenshots of how it works. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to jump into the weeds there. But having some sort of high level screenshot end user experience that you've at least heard about offhand, I think that's 20%. But for me, I only had end user experience, and I did have a pretty broad knowledge of Workday. That's kind of my system right now. But I signed up for whatever training I could. I listened in on whatever calls they'd let me join in on. And I was BCC'd on a bunch of emails just so I could take notes, learn the language. The lingo after school is just, it's bonkers, the stuff that people say at work, like we're going to parking lot it. I'm sure y'all use it now at UVA because you're all smart, but I never used the term parking lot, and I had to Google what that meant. So it's picking up the language and picking up everything in stride while getting at least a high level understanding of the system that you're trying to get into would be helpful. Does that answer your question?
No, it totally does. It also makes me curious, Catherine, too, about maybe at CapTech specifically, how the structure works. It's not on my list of questions, so I'm going a little rogue here, but how does the structure work for projects and engagement? It sounds like there's teams that sort of work together on the client side of things, but I think students are always curious about like how entry-level roles sort of work with upper-level roles and just how that all works. It's a complicated question. It may not make a ton of sense, but any thoughts on that, how it's structured?
Yeah, for entry level, when I started, I was under a team. So it was just a project manager, me, a couple configuration analysts, a couple business analysts, and we all work under, one PM who's been under one PM on the client side. So you usually have, like, whether you're brand new or you're, a 50-year veteran at the company, you'll have an internal PM and a client-side project manager. And for me as an entry level, I got a little scrappy. So you might get you may get hired as a business analyst, say. I think that's usually, I think that's a pretty broad term for any consulting company that you'll start as a BA. But you could get thrown into anything. I started as a organizational change management consultant. I'd never done OCM, but I helped build job aids and PowerPoint decks and resource repositories for a client. And so what that helped me with was I didn't have any huge aggressive deliverables, but my deliverables were physical, they were tangible. So it helped me, rather than creating a strategy for change management, I got to just do the very, very end user product of, once our system that CapTech is building goes live, Catherine is responsible for the training that will be facilitated by the client, and we'll have, CapTech's name may not be on it, but now I was able to gain all this knowledge about the system we were implementing. So hopefully most CapTechers start, they do have sort of a mentor, and that's how, Drew, you asked about the structure. I have a coach. We don't have managers at CapTech. We have coaches. So my coach I've never worked on a project with her. She is in the Richmond office, but she serves as solely my advocate for not only projects, but also for my personal development, my professional development, anything under the sun. She's kind of my go-to lady. And she will advocate for me on a project, but when it comes to actual day-to-day project stuff, I have my own PM who I report to, and then we have a a broader service offering team. So while I'm on a Workday project, my other Workday coworkers are on another. We all work under one larger team. So especially as a new person, you may have like a lot of hierarchies that go up and up until you finally get to the CEO. With CapTech, it's pretty flat. So, you know, your project manager may be like a senior director who's one step below an executive. So it kind of just depends on your company. But either way, you'll always have your client side PM and your internal PM.
Okay, that's super helpful. I think it's always cool to hear about things that make organizations different and unique. And it sounds like that sort of coaching model is pretty unique and cool to CapTech's culture, and I think really impacts probably your day-to-day and kind of how you feel as an employee there, which I think is really incredible. So I love that.
Sure.
Got your own coach. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we've been trying to keep each other sane too. So yeah. It's been really fun to have like, and even as a third-party event person, if you're just having a tough day outside of work, it's important to build those relationships within any consulting company. And the reason for that, and if I leave you with anything, it probably is that building relationships is of the utmost importance. And if you get into your company and you realize, I don't think consulting is for me, I think I want to be on the back end of the house and not be client facing, that is always totally fine. And I think whenever you can build a relationship, as I just spoke about with my coach, they will be able to advocate for you. So they'll only know what you tell them. And whenever I can, I want to build relationships. I want to meet people. I want to connect with them on a human level that may not pertain to our specific project. But down the road, if we maybe want to win more work with that client, or if I'm trying to get into a totally new practice area at CapTech, I now have this buddy that's like, hey, I don't know how you work, but you're a really fun person to be around. I feed off your energy, and I think you can learn quickly. So let's try it out. So I think with coaches, it's really awesome because she's not day-to-day right there with me elbow to elbow. And that way I get to build this whole other story. Not that I'm like lying to or anything, but I get to build myself in a whole different way than I can with a project manager who I am keeping in lockstep with every day. You know, I get to tell her my accomplishments brand new and fresh, whereas on a project side, it's really awesome, but you're still trying to keep up with the client demands. So if I leave you with anything, build relationships when you can and keep fostering them. I don't have a green thumb, so if you do, that's impressive, but be the gardener for your own relationship.
Yeah, well, I think that's a wonderful quote that I just want to keep and put in the follow-up message too. And I think, Catherine, you're addressing a lot of the softer skills that I don't know that are always thought about as much in consulting. I think the relationship management piece is a really important element that maybe sometimes goes under the radar for importance. So students think a great note to take away of like, if you can demonstrate competency and ability to build and establish relationships, that's a really helpful thing and a really helpful skill to talk to employers about. So thank you for sharing that. That's really helpful. Your history major, you talked a little bit about how helpful that has been to you, but if there's anything else you want to add, how has that major sort of served you well in a field like consulting?
I love that. I don't know if anybody is a history major on the call. If you are, I'd love you to peep up at the end and let me know. History, I've loved it as a topic, as an area of study. What's helped me and what surprised me probably the most of coming out of UVA, I for one love telling people that I'm a history major when they ask. Clients for some reason have been asking a lot recently. I don't know if they assume that I'm like a literary major or like a French major. I don't know. But when they ask, I'm like, yeah, I was a history major. And either that sparks a great conversation, they tell me about it, or they're like, wow, why didn't you become a professor? What I've learned is that from UVA and the ability to summarize, synthesize, and be succinct in your language and be powerful and empowering at the same time. There are so many people who I work with who are like 45 and above who can't write a decent email and who like not even just grammar, can't really write one, but just don't have the ability to use really strong verbiage and really evoke a sense of confidence, but also to invite the client into answering those questions, or even an internal email that you're trying to excite or that you're trying to console. It is baffling that a lot of people don't have that skill. And as companies are going more and more remote, even before COVID, 10% more companies every year are adding the ability to be remote. So it's happening. It's happening really quickly across the country and world, I guess. And if you use those skills that you have from UVA, you don't have to have been a history major, but any company needs that capability. Honestly, like if you think about it, anybody can backfill a Workday consultant. Workday is a pretty easy system to learn. You can become a wizard at it, but if you also can back it up with being engaging, with being excited, and somebody that clients can relate to, that's a lot harder to replace. And again, I am shocked by, the level of expertise that a lot of our technical consultants bring to the table, but more often I'm surprised by how few of them feel confident in writing a good email or a memo or executive summary. So it's been really fun to step up and kind of show off, like, yeah, I went to UVA, and they teach us how to read and write at that school. I really only say that to the other, like Duke and Virginia Tech people. But I think it's telling the story, and it's getting to the root of what is really going on. And from high school to UVA, I think that's been beyond what you can put a price tag on. So again, Drew, to your point, technical expertise is really nice, but at some point that tool may retire, something new may come up, and you'll have to learn a whole new one. So the ability to back up your relationships with eloquence, with being prompt with your deliverables, and being a relationship builder, you can't put a price tag on it. At least that's what I tell myself. I don't know. Maybe super replaceable. I have no idea.
No, you're doing well. I love that. I think that's super helpful. And again, I think one of the pieces that sometimes feels hard from a liberal arts perspective is just communicating the strengths that has when you sort of think about the more academic side of things. So the points you're bringing up, I think, are hopefully really helpful for students on the call. Like, here's how I can communicate the strengths that I have that maybe I don't understand as well or don't think about as much being relevant to a business or consulting type role or a technical consulting type role. That's hugely helpful. Thank you. In terms of your daily work, what do you like most about it? But then also, what are some challenges that you face on a daily basis in your job as a technical consultant?
Good question. I'd say what I really love about it is I love getting the little daily wins. So you may not always have a client that cheers you on and that exudes like gratefulness and gratitude when you deliver something. So whenever I can pat myself on the back or pat my teammates on the back for fixing a bug or delivering a fancy new report, I jump on it. I think, like today, one of my coworkers put something into production for a client, and he's pretty green, so he's like pumped. He's teasing us, he's sending us memes, and he's just so pumped. And that's like my favorite part. And it happens pretty like daily. I wouldn't say that happens once a month or so. It happens pretty often. So that's probably my most favorite part of the day. And I love to just chatting, connecting with my coworkers. I miss them a lot, seeing their faces. So it's fun to connect with them. I'd say my least favorite, I don't love video chat, like video with my clients, especially since clients usually don't put their video on. So, and CapTech really wants us to be visible. So, I'm having to look not terrible, which is kind of annoying. I also don't love having to fight an uphill battle with clients. I mentioned earlier, we are technical consultants, which by the true meaning of the word, we want to steer them in the right direction, and we do not just do something just to do it or because the client tells us to. So it's really tough when you're trying to convince a client to do something and you need to plant the idea in their head and make them think, very Inception-like, want to plant the idea in their head and make them think it's theirs. That can be a little frustrating, but usually we come around to it. And I've learned over the past year and a half to just be patient and keep pushing at it and be repetitive. Don't want to sound like a broken record, but don't want to get the point across. So that's probably the most frustrating part of my day is, fighting an uphill battle when you feel confident. And conversely, maybe I don't feel confident in what we're doing, and I am not sure if we totally need to scrap it. So, it's just a daily temperature check of, what is my end goal? How am I tracking against it? And what are my hurdles? How can I, find the solution to those before it becomes a critical error?
That's helpful. Thank you. I agree. Video chat thing, it's rough and sometimes isn't as engaging. So it's always nice.
Welcome to my apartment.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally get it. Students, I've got a couple more questions. If you've got additional questions, feel free to start popping those in the chat and I'll get to those as soon as I finish. So if you've got things you're curious about from Catherine, please pop them in there and I'll make sure we get those asked before the call is over. As we sort of continue here, if you can think of one skill you think are important, you mentioned LinkedIn Learning as one option, but that students could gain over the summer. Many have had internships canceled or are doing things remotely or part-time and are looking for something to do to kind of get their leg up in the recruitment process. Any insight, advice on skills that you think are really important to gain over the summer?
Yeah, firstly, my heart goes out to y'all and being persistent and determined and joining stuff like this. I think y'all are an awesome group of kids, even though I don't know you. My brother just graduated from UVA, and I look to y'all for strength sometimes because it's amazing. I hope you keep at it. Don't get discouraged. Shoot, I didn't even have an excuse to become a baker and work in retail. And y'all now have, I hope the world feels like it's your oyster. You can really do anything and nobody can say anything about it. So I hope you keep at it because you're doing great. I'd say to get ahead of the curve, which I'm sure some of y'all are like first years and way ahead of it. But for those who are feeling the pressure, I'd say at least for free stuff that you can do at home, I just took a course on Code Academy. It's free. It's great. It's SQL. So if you want to get into SQL learning, you can do that. I just took it and it was fascinating. Get you into data analytics and data visualization. I would look at Code Academy if you're trying to get at least entry-level technical expertise. That's free. I would also do some research. And by research, I mean, if there's a business vertical that you're interested in, so say you're interested in sales operations or HR operations like I would look at SHRM, which is SHRM, I think it's .org, and look at some of the research papers. Like go Google things, like what are the trends of tech companies, and kind of make your own case study. So one thing that we've been looking at CapTech is we've been doing a bunch of blogs. So if you have time, if you have a company or a particular consulting firm that you're looking to jump into, go on their website and see if they have any blogs and see what their people are saying. Sometimes the blogs are going to refer back to something on LinkedIn Learning. They'll have something in Code Academy, something like that, or they'll be interviewing like presidents of Fortune 500 companies and talking about how tech has solved a problem for them, or talking about future issues. So when you look at those blogs or when you're doing some research, I would make your own case study. So that's what we've been doing with some of our college grads is kind of have them make up a problem. For like one of them, for instance, we're looking a bunch at bike shares and saying, okay, what are we doing with bike shares right now in COVID? How do we schedule maintenance crews to clean the bikes without, keeping people from being able to use them? And how do we keep everybody safe? So that's a small scale, but do something bigger. Like how are Apple employees going to be able to maintain security while they're off site? And just talk through a problem with yourself. And you can even write it out, like write a proposal, make your own little statement of work. And that way, when you're in the interview process with a consulting firm and they're asking you, what have you done with your life since school ended? You can say, well, I've been learning your language. I've been learning how I can walk through a problem and how I can solution. So while some of the resources that we've talked about, like LinkedIn Learning, they do require, I think, you need to pay for it. There are ways that you can use like very public information and kind of make your own work path out of it. I hope that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense to me, somebody yell at me.
No, it does. And students, you'll have access to LinkedIn Learning through being at UVA, so you can do it right on through. So that's
awesome.
I use it all the time for my own development. I learned.
Same.
Yeah,
Oh my
so
gosh.
it's super helpful and wonderful to have access to. So you sort of were digging a little bit into interviews, and I just got a question in the chat I want to talk about because I think it's a great question. Big thank you to Catherine, who starts off saying, currently preparing for case interviews with big firms in mind, how does the interview process at a place like CapTech differ from some of those bigger firms, if at all?
That's a great question. I think CapTech puts a lot of value in the human side of things. So we do have a case study. I think whichever company you go to, you'll probably have a case study. I think what I would say is a college grad, they will not expect you to be able to build something in front of their eyes and make it functional. I think for CapTech, what they want to hear are some of the buzzwords of, using teamwork. How do you collaborate? How do you anticipate the problems that a client could have? And how do you get on their level? How do you put yourself in the client's shoes and understand really where they're coming from? I think a lot of consulting companies, we talk about the big five a lot. So that's, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, those folks. They have so like hundreds of years of expertise, but with that can come some prescription. Like you already know, they've already diagnosed the problem. They've already seen it. They're going to tell you what they need to do, and then they're going to do it. And they're going to do it for a lot of money. CapTech, we don't work like that. We don't want to bring you something out of the box if that's not what's going to work for you. We want to get on your level and cater it, make it work for you. So when it comes to an interview process, it kind of rolls the same way. If you're a college kid, we're not going to expect you to be able to build something out of scratch, but we do want to hear what your thought process is on how to answer something. How do you walk through a problem? What are the things that stick out to you, and how do you march towards your end goal? So something that I've been working on that I've gotten feedback on is sometimes I can stray away from what my end goal is. So I would challenge y'all, when you're in an interview, tell them what your goal is. Like if your goal is to become a lawyer, I would say, maybe not right at the beginning of the interview, but I would say, my goal is to get professional development so that I can use that experience to move into the legal side of the house. I want to, and you may not have your goal totally formulated, but even if it's just for the day's goal, like my goal for this afternoon is to build a relationship with you as interviewers. I want to get a better understanding of what you expect from your consultants, and then I want to be able to express what I can bring to the table. And if we can marry those two, then all the better. So I think as you're preparing for interviews, find your strengths and be really aware of your areas of opportunity. I think using your teammates as leverage to boost up those areas of opportunity while still leveraging your areas of strength, that'll show really well and beautifully in an interview, especially if you kind of lack the tech side of any case study. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, no, that's hugely helpful. That's hugely helpful. And I think the things that I heard to sort of emphasize are leveraging your strengths. I think it's just a big overall theme to kind of keep in mind of that. I think the case interview is one that I think many students get sort of squirrely about and nervous. They want to produce the perfect result every single time. And I think we try and impart the importance of a structured response, talk about your strengths, be able to communicate effectively and concisely. That's what's really important. So I'm glad that you echoed that. I'm hopeful that that is heard, and I think that's great. So thank you. That was a great question that came in, and a student has said thank you. So that's awesome. Just a couple more questions from me. So if you sort of knew then what you know now about just the world outside of work from UVA, what's like a piece of advice you would have given yourself as a UVA student? Like we'll say you were thinking about consulting. What would you have told yourself back then as a UVA grad, soon to be UVA grad?
Yeah, I would have told myself that as a history major, you didn't make a wrong choice, first of all. I think I got a lot of grief from, friends, family, relations that why did you become a history major? How can you apply that to anything outside of becoming a teacher? And I would have told them to, STFU, and I made a great choice for me. I probably would have told myself to be more confident in my ability to use school skill in professional world. I think I was like scared stiff to leave school and be in a cubicle. I think I imagined, Office Space, if y'all have ever seen those movies, probably way before your time, where everybody's sitting in a desk. Nobody really knows what anybody's doing. You just have a boss being, rude to you all the time. I think I would have said, be confident in what you can provide. And work is totally not like that. I mean, at least not at CapTech. I mean, we don't really sit in a cubicle all day, and it doesn't need to look like that. So I think I could forge my own path, and that I could, even though I was, just a history major, I could still make a really great impact for teams, and I can do it at a level that far exceeds anybody else who graduated from any other school. I think UVA students really stand out and use that confidence that you've gotten from college, or build it right after college, that can propel you into professional world. Because it's all, age really doesn't matter when you leave school. So I am overseeing like a 40-year-old guy on our Workday team, but he's fresh. He's never done Workday before. So I'm his mentor. And you just kind of roll with the punches. And that guy doesn't mind. So why should I mind that I'm just a kid helping him learn? Yeah, be confident in yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Don't apologize to yourself for making those choices. I think that's a really great piece of advice. I think people sometimes get to the end and realize, did I make a good choice? Yes, you did. You made a great choice. So I love that. Yeah. Students, please keep popping questions in if you have them. I want to make sure we respect Catherine's time. We've got some 15 minutes left of time for questions. So I have two more for you. In just general advice about people who are interested in consulting, it's a big industry and one that can feel sometimes hard to break into. Do you just any advice in general for a student thinking about consulting?
I think I would do some research on which consulting firm you're looking at. I mentioned the Big Five. There's a lot of concern for burnout. I think obviously everybody's journey at a company is different, but there are big companies that can swallow you up and can overwork you. So setting your boundaries and knowing what you're willing to do is really important. And that's important whether you get into consulting or do something else. Setting those boundaries and understanding that a company will, at the end of the day, look out for their bottom line. So, and CapTech is the same way. I mean, with COVID, we've seen it that CapTech now, we're going after work that it seems pretty small to me. It'll be one or two people, but in CapTech's mind, it's like, well, we're going to save one or two people from potentially, if we're just paying for them, we'd have to let them go. So they're going after any project they can to keep people there. But when I talk about getting your foot in the door in consulting, definitely do your research and make sure you have your boundaries set. But I would look at maybe something outside the Big Five. I challenge you all to, if you have a city you really want to go work in, so I know a bunch of UVA students, they go to Colorado or they go to, San Francisco or New York or DC, I'd look at maybe there's something else besides PwC that you can get into. Maybe go into the smaller house consulting firms. And that way you'll be able to get your hands in all the cookie jars than being like sort of a one-trick pony at a big five. And again, that's kind of just words I've heard from my friends who work at big consulting firms and small ones too. I mean, I don't want to make Captech seem like the beacon of consulting firms, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in these smaller shop consulting firms where students like y'all can really shine right off the bat than going to like a massive, I mean, the history and the story and the spotlight of companies like Deloitte are just, I think kids need a better culture. So really look at that culture fit. Make sure you have your boundary set of like, okay, if you're not willing to travel 75% of the time, and that's gonna disqualify you from getting, you know, the entry level role at KPMG, then be confident in that decision. I think really quickly we can say yes to something because it seems really cool. But I'll tell you all from experience, all of my clients have been out of state, and until COVID, it's been a lot to travel. So it was a good decision for me to set a boundary and tell my PM, and that way, okay, the next time this opportunity comes and they want you, we'll make sure to set that boundary of, okay, Catherine's only going to come every other week. She's not going to be there every week, or maybe once a month. So it'll serve you in the long run, even if it feels really tough in the beginning. I hope I didn't drone. But yeah, I think particularly for a UVA student who has so much to offer, and, you know, whether you majored in dance or, you know, entrepreneurship, I think you can offer a lot at a smaller shop firm. So I'd challenge you to look at them all. Like, find something in the city you really like and see what people are saying. Look at Glassdoor, talk to your buddies, join the alumni. If you're not already on it, make sure you're in the alumni network, and I think you can see where they work. So reach out to them and say, what's your experience been? And they may be totally different from what I'm describing, but I just, you know that from some horror stories. So
Yeah.
I hope that's
Well,
helpful.
no, that's super helpful. And students, one of the things you can utilize is LinkedIn is a great tool for browsing where alumni are working, and we can always chat about that in an appointment if you have questions about it. So keep that in mind. Catherine, last question I have references also to a student question in the chat. So you mentioned before SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, as one resource that students can look at. So yes, that is exactly what that was perfect. But abbreviations are always hard, right? It's like, what is SHRM? So that's there, which is great. Are there any other resources? You referenced Code Academy as one that you recently utilized as a free resource. Are there any other resources that you use to sort of stay current on top of things? You mentioned blogs on different firms' websites, associations, things like that you recommend students kind of utilize to kind of keep themselves up to date?
I kind of like a lot of my stuff. If I could add Google as like a skill that I have, I would. I don't have like a particular system or tool that I use. Really, I'm going after like Forbes and from LinkedIn. Like I just have the normal account. I'm scrolling through and looking through top noted, top shared stuff, and seeing those trends. And I'm also looking locally. I know with Captech, we want you to work where you live. So I'm looking at Richmond specific things, looking at Richmond BizSense. Check your local newspaper and see what's going on. One of my projects involves international law. So we're looking at, I have a client office in the UK and in Asia Pacific. And so I'm keeping up to date with like the Queen's taxes. And so what I'm doing there is I'm honestly just Googling, like, so I don't know. I'm kind of taking it as they come. It's hard to determine what research items you need to do before they come to you. But, like for now, I would say research, like what are the remote capabilities of companies and what is the economic impact of that going forward? And then from there, well, are companies even going to buy office space anymore? And for a company like WeWork, what went wrong there? And WeWork, being a remote workspace where you can sort of, book a time that you have an office, what went wrong. So it kind of escalates. Like if y'all have ever played the Wikipedia game where you see if you can track, I don't know, you start with a lunchbox and try to end it, I don't know, Kevin Bacon or something. You kind of go down your own foxholes. And I think all of that stuff is really important to learn. But I just use Google, like the search engine, and kind of go down my own rabbit hole and look at your local newspaper and see what you can find. And then if anything, it's going to spark an interesting conversation, and you never know when an interesting fact will be useful. Like I took a LinkedIn learning course a few weeks ago on how to work well remotely. And that's when they dropped the 10% of companies each year, 10% more companies each year building their remote capabilities. And I've now said that twice, and I didn't think I ever used that. I hope it's the correct stat. So yeah, I think Google and use whatever you have on hand if you don't have online capabilities.
We got some more questions from students, which is awesome. So this question, Catherine, is about, are there any specific resources that you'd recommend to prepare for tech cases in terms of tech mock interviews, before the actual case, that would be helpful for students to consider?
Yeah, I know case studies. I know when I was graduating, I just had forgotten how scary they were. It's probably the scariest part of any interview. I didn't really have a case study because they knew that I didn't have any technical expertise. So they just I had it more of a tech interview. Resource-wise, I would look up, I know there are resources in LinkedIn and, online in the ether about how to solve problems. I think that's kind of where you need to start. I think case study, because you may only have 10 minutes. I think knowing where you need to start on a problem, or knowing really what they're asking, is of utmost importance. So I would research and use, I don't have any specific resources though. I mean, aside from using LinkedIn Learning, maybe type in problem solving or, project management, how to best fix problems in parallel with other deliverables. I don't have a specific repository if that's what you're looking for, but my first search for y'all would be, how do I problem solve? How do I start? And then how do I build out a solution? So what is the end goal supposed to look like? So though you may have every knowledge on the steps and whatever the project, solution steps are, but what is your end goal and what is your final deliverable? So if you can read through a question and get to the bottom of what does the client want to see at the end of the project, then you can build from there. How do I get there from the top to the bottom? So I'd find resources on how to get there.
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
Something better.
No, that's great advice. No, and I think the other thing you talked about before is that firm research and talking and engaging with alumni and people who work at different firms too. I think is another way you can sort of gain insight into how techy the cases are going to be and what that looks like by asking other alums what their perspective has been, experience has been at the different companies. And typically students in info sessions and things, they'll explain a little bit more about how it's going to look. So just kind of keep that in mind too. Don't stress too much about it. And Catherine's point has been, it's really foundationally important that you can structure your response and your problem. So I think that piece becomes really paramountly important. And again, sometimes maybe a little bit undersold on importance too. So it's important to keep in mind. This will probably be the last question we have time for, Catherine, before we finish. And it's a really good one too. So in terms of sort of career trajectory, what do people typically do after technical consulting? What does that look like?
Great question. And really, really quick about the case study. Do not worry about it. Y'all will do fine. And a lot of it is to see how you'll work as a teammate. So you'll do great. Don't worry about it. Career trajectory. That's funny. I was just talking to my coworker about it, and he's my age, but he's looking to start his own company. I think if you become a technical expert or a SME, a subject matter expert, and a lot of folks especially the older generation, just want to sit there. Like they want to be a senior director, stay a senior director. They don't want to become a C-suite person. You know, you get your work-life balance, whatever you need to do with your family, you have that flexibility. I think, like for me, my goal at the end of this, I would love to be a principal at a company. Be great if it was CapTech, but if it's not, no big deal. I want to empower people at a company level, and then more broadly in a region to engage with CapTechers or with their consultant companies, and bring them into the fold into these really amazing, cool strategy, you know, operations and decisions that we're trying to make, and just forging that region forward into a new tech space and really preparing for the future. But for people in tech consulting who don't really want to do it anymore, you're kind of like, you can do whatever you want. If you want to, I think a lot of people get into entrepreneurship because now you've seen probably every side of the house. So a lot of people start their own firm. If you want to stay at a company, I know a lot of our older folks who don't really want to, you know, go on client visits but still want to be part of the professional world. They just go internal. So they'll do more operational side of things, maybe go into payroll or tax or legal, just because they have that expertise, but maybe don't want to be client facing anymore. So you can kind of do whatever you want. So I suggest, as I mentioned earlier, is you build relationships. If at any point you say, hey, I'm kind of getting burnt out, or I'm just not getting challenged anymore, that person that you met at that networking event, or the person that you chatted with when you had an issue at work, that person now gets to be your advocate, and you can say, hey, can I shadow you? Can I join on your next meeting? And I want to see if I can do what you do. So yeah, the world's totally your oyster. Whatever you want to do.
I love that. Catherine, thank you so much for taking this hour to spend time
Thank
with
you,
us.
Drew.
It's been hugely helpful, and you have been such a delight and so fun in talking about technical consulting, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much.